we're going to see how this goes. Please be patient with us. So, Heal and Grow with Nickie, but this time I am interviewing one of my dearest friends ever. This is Dr. Betsy Maloney Leaf, but I just call her Betsy. And Betsy has this fabulous company that she just started called Roots and Vines, and it's all about gardening and propagating, and it's amazing. And I will put all of her social handles in the comments. But today we're going to talk about healing and growing through gardening and planting with Dr. Betsy Maloney Leaf, and the crowd goes wild.
I'm so happy to be here with
Hi.
you, and you too, but you.
Right, basically this is just two girlfriends gabbing in a backyard.
Yep.
Okay, so Betsy.
Yes.
Well, let's first start with how Bets and I know each other.
Yeah, that's
We
gold too.
met just a couple of years ago as freshmen at Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter, dancing. We both came. We were studio dancers, and then we got to college. And I don't know about you, B, but I did not understand what I was going to be doing in college dance. And now I love it, and now Betsy teaches it, and I'll let her tell you all about that. But I remember sitting in the dance room that first day and just being like, what are we doing? And then Betsy actually got the very first dance major. You created it, the dance major at Gustavus, right? How did you do that?
Well, I think I can answer that question by answering what was that first day like as a first-year student at Gustavus, and I didn't know what I was walking into, because honestly at that point I was ready to be done dancing. I had done it in a different context. It had run its course.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And when I came to Gustavus, I had made the decision to do other things. And it took me about 24 hours before I realized, and that was really truly that quickly, how important dance was to my way of navigating around the world. And I saw a flyer, and there were just a couple of moments. And the reason I share that story is it was a moment where I relinquished something, and it allowed me to get perspective to realize how important it was. And so I think the same thing was true when it was time to declare a major. I had already completed an English major. I still had about a year left. And it was another moment where I could see what was supposed to happen next, and I was about to relinquish dance because I didn't think of it as a career. And I realized, oh my gosh, it's like totally fundamental to who I am. And so it was pivotal to be able to let go in that moment. And I think that's an important lesson that has filled a lot, even these conversations around gardening. So that's how it came to be.
So you didn't think that you would be able to make a career out
No,
of dance?
oh no, absolutely not. Because I carried a lot of stories about what it meant to be a dancer. Oh, you do this, and you look this way, and you believe this way, and none of those really, when I was 18, fit with what my beliefs and values were at the time. And so it was really a reckoning and then a re-education of like, oh, this is what dance can be. And I think that that's important to mention, because it's a lesson that I keep learning over and over again, whether it's through my creative practice or it's through gardening, that really I'm the one that determines what it's going to be instead of what the system is.
Yes,
so.
Nuggets. Yes, nuggets. I love these wisdom nuggets. I don't know. They're nuggets. I love them. So then, just because we're still talking about it before we get to Roots and Vines, I want to stop for a second and just remind everyone that Bets just said she didn't think that she could make a career out of it, which is a whole nother thing that we could go into, because essentially both of us have made our livings up dancing. So will you tell everyone what you're doing in the dance world?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So when I'm not gardening, I guess spoiler alert, I became a dancer. So I graduated from Gustavus. I was still really hungry for dance. I was at a place where I was embracing what it meant to me to be a dancer and to be an artist. I don't come from a family of artists, so I didn't have anybody to look to, like, how is this supposed to go? So I ended up getting my master's degree in dance, and then, life brought me back to Minnesota, and I started teaching, and I ended up teaching at a performing arts high school, which again was not my career path, but I fell in love with it. And I realized in my teaching practice and being able to work with kids that were just on the cusp of figuring out who they were in the world, that they too were struggling with this idea of like, I could be an artist. That was never an option, or maybe they didn't have anybody that they knew that was making a living that way. I just really fell in love with teaching and teaching dance really well. At some point, I realized that education maybe wasn't serving all of my students well. And so I was still curious, I was still hungry, so I decided to go back and investigate a little bit more by getting a doctorate. So I went to the University of Minnesota, and I really dedicated my time to figuring out how to make arts education, but specifically dance, accessible, and to really, I'm going to use the word reckoning again, but to really take a look at the way arts has always been delivered in K-12 schools and how we can do a better job, and what are the obstacles, the challenges, and the oppressions that are systemic, really, in it. And so that's what I've devoted my time to, and I actually did not go back into the K-12 classroom after I spent time with my research, because I felt like I could affect more change. I could make more stronger, well, I couldn't make, but I could help communities build stronger arts programs if I took a look at the teacher training process. So I have been co-licensed program lead, which is really a fancy title for I help run the licensure program at the University of Minnesota for 6-7 years. And that's where most of my time is spent, training people to be teachers, researching, and then I still work with undergraduates, like getting them to think about, oh my gosh, arts is not a category, it's everything that we do.
Yes.
So that's what I do.
And then when I was getting my K-12 dance and theater license, Betsy actually helped me with that and was doing her own program. And so it's been interesting to see how, I mean, we've been friends this entire time, like 20 some years, gosh. But how our paths sort of combine and then diverge and then combine and then diverge. I'm listening to you talk, I got really emotional.
It's okay, we're good. We do that for each other.
We do that. There's something so special about watching our friends succeed, you know, and especially because we've been friends so long that I think we consider each other successful people, and we've also seen all the junk that's gone on to get from here to there. So while you were talking, I just had this moment where I was like, look at my beautiful friend, just like succeeding and excelling, and so anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge it because I'm
so sweet.
You're probably gonna notice that I start crying at some point, and that's why. So anyway, fast forward to, well, a couple years ago. When did you really start your Instagram?
Well, let's see. Yeah, I think it's probably been about 18 months, and so it was October of 2019.
Okay, so almost
2 years.
2 years. Yeah. Betsy starts this Instagram account, and it's still there. So check it out, Roots and Vines, and I'll put it in the comments as well. But from my perspective, and from I think a couple of our friends' perspectives, we were like, "What? This is awesome." What? Like, you know, it's so fun when friendships or families or whatever after this long of time can surprise you. Yeah. All of a sudden you're posting essentially a daily journal of your gardens, and you can't see all of this. I'll take some pictures and add them in somehow, but there's vegetable gardens and there's flower gardens, and they're just everywhere, and everything's beautiful, and every day, multiple times a day, usually she'll be like, here's the, I know nothing, I'm just gonna I know nothing about planting and growing other than what Betsy has taught me this summer, but she'll be like, here is the tiny flowering pot from...
You're doing great. Keep going.
And she's like, I meditated on...
And I spoke softly to it.
I spoke softly, and I said, you could do it, little girl. And what it told me was, and obviously we're being silly, but also kind of not.
Right.
Like, it's these thoughts about how you thought it was going to grow, but maybe it went a different way, and what it's teaching you, not only about the plants themselves, but what it's teaching you about your life and what it's like to be human in the world. Yeah. And it's amazing, and I had no idea that this was a part of my dear friend's life. So how did Roots and Vines start?
Sure.
And maybe like where are you at right now,
Yep.
and what are you hoping to
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah, that's great. So, actually, I tell an origin story. Maybe that's not the right word, but people often ask, like, "Oh, when did you know you wanted to be a dancer?" And for a long time, I said, "Well, I told the story that I told you. When I went to college, I fell in love with the program. I found a mentor. I found a great group of dancers to support me. But actually, as I've gotten older, I realized my story as a dancer starts long before that." And I'll share it with you just to give you a sense of like how I think seeds that are planted early take a long time to blossom, and that's true I think for gardening. But when my mom was pregnant with me, she would take me near music or sound, and I would always find the beat and kick. And so the whole family knew before I was born that I was a dancer. That's sort of like the playful way that they referred to me. And so that would be a family story that they would tell over time, my parents or my grandmother would tell over time. And I realized, actually, when I got into research and thinking about how arts education shows up in kids' lives, that was actually, that was permission from a certain level from my family to be a dancer. Like that was the beginning, is when my family had already identified and told the story over and over again about how I could always find the beat before I was even born.
Yeah, so you're born into this world, and there's already an expectation. I mean, my mom tells the same story about me, that she's like, I knew she was a tap dancer.
Yeah.
So you're born, and there's already some type of expectation, which I think happens all the time. But maybe in this case,
Yep, it was.
This actually served
right,
you.
It did. I think I carried that story, and I didn't realize the power of that story because it could have gone a different way, right?
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't have felt it was permissible or an option or something that my family valued. And I think to a certain degree, when I talk about my gardening, I have a very similar story. I say I'm a fourth generation gardener because my great grandmother was a really prolific gardener. My grandmother was also a very prolific gardener, and I have a lot of really cherished memories growing up, being able to visit. She grew hybrid tea roses, and so when I'd go to her house, I could walk in the summer and I could just smell the roses wafting. So it was always there. My mother is an amazing gardener, and I didn't really have any interest in gardening at all until I became a homeowner, really. And then I think something that was latent just sort of like popped up. And so the first thing that I got was, this would have been in 2001, I bought myself a ficus tree at Bachman's, an indoor ficus tree, and that was like my symbol that I am now an adult and I'm a homeowner, and so I can take care of a plant. I still have the ficus tree. It's over by the garage.
Ooh, I'll take a picture.
And I kept that alive, and then over time I would go visit my grandmother, and maybe because I knew that she wasn't going to be around forever and that I just loved being in her garden, I would ask her to share some of her plants with me. I killed them all. Like
You
I
did?
have, oh yeah, I killed them all. I do have some lilies left from her, but most of them, I look back now and my heart hurts, but I killed a lot of them.
This makes me feel just a little bit better.
Oh, it's
about
for sure. I did not know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I liked the idea of gardening. I just didn't know how to do it.
Right.
And I think I liked the idea of gardening because it reminded me of my mom and my grandmother and my great-grandmother. So, so I've actually been gardening for over 20 years. And then when I actually got into a place where there was a big yard, it just flipped a switch for me. And I find a lot of respite at home. I find peace at home. There are aspects of work, no matter what your work is, that can be really stressful. And for me, I can work through what I need to work through if I'm toiling around in the garden. And it just became a place of solace. I also share a story. I don't have any tattoos, but I have friends who have tattoos, and they say, once you get one, you can't stop. And for me, gardening is like that. Like, once I started that first garden over there, I couldn't stop. And luckily I have an amazing partner who also shares the same thing, and he's all in, and he really indulges me quite a bit, but he also likes it as well. So it becomes this really nice moment of us being able to work together. So that's how I started, and I've had it for a long time, but I just didn't lead with it. It was always something that was very private. I just did for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what, now that you're public,
Now that I'm public,
how has that changed for you? Has it given you validation? Has it, because now I find you're always talking about like your gardener friends, and and some of them you met through Instagram,
That's
just
right.
through posting.
Yep.
So like,
Yep.
so now that you've decided to share this part of you with the world, what changes have you noticed in yourself, and maybe even in your gardens?
Yeah, I think, and this actually relates back to something that we talked about earlier. Nikki knows me pretty well, but you probably have picked up on it in the stories. I'm a planner, and I'm very strategic, and I like to overthink. I'm really good at overthinking. And one thing that I've learned, I think, actually choosing to have an Instagram account where I really live with my gardening was a response to a need that I had to be present. And I'm not very good at being present. And so I just made this offhand commitment to myself that nobody else needed to know about, to just every day show up in the natural space around me, no matter the season, and just be present for a moment and see things that are right here immediately in my backyard, so that I'm not thinking about what comes next or strategizing what I have to do. That there's part of my brain that will do that, and I'll do that in other parts of my work. But here it's just to show up. And so I think, when I post in the mornings, I do it as part of like a morning routine. I don't necessarily know what I'm going to write about.
Okay.
And as a planner, that's very terrifying.
Yeah.
And I'm committed to sticking with that, to like, to just walking out here and finding something, to just be in the moment. Now, there are times when something really exciting happens in the garden and I'm already thinking like a writer, and I think, I want to explore this more. I want to write about this more. Or there have been a couple of times when I've woken up in the middle of the night, oh my gosh, I should write about this. I just figured it out. But by and large, it's a way of being really present. And every time I want to stray forward and start planning, over planning, I just remind myself like the whole point of this experience and what's showing up in the garden is happening right now. And that's I think that will be a lesson that I will have to work through for the rest of my life.
I love that. I also have a hard time living in the present moment. So what you're saying is really resonating with me. I don't think I'm going to be a gardener, but although, let's take a second.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your coaching?
Sure.
Great. So start there, and
Okay.
then we'll.
Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead. Talk about plug yourself.
Okay.
Talk about your coaching.
Well, so you and I, we have this shared.
Don't you like
past.
how we're pretending like this noise is not happening in the background? We are excellent actors.
You know what we're doing? We're being present.
We're being present. And then, of course, I had to take us out of the
That's okay.
moment and acknowledge it. So
That's all right.
anyway, yes, we know there's noise, but we're just going to keep doing this. Okay.
This is who we are. So we have this shared background. We're teachers.
Yeah.
Right? And in parts of our professional life, we've had categories and titles and licenses, and we have permissions to be teaching in different spaces and working with different student populations, and that feeds us. But what I realize is less about the output of what I create and more about the opportunity to help people get to where they want to go. So garden coaching is a term that I think people are familiar with, but it's really just about like teaching, and it's what I would do with my students anyways. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to get to? How can I help you get there? When can I provide you support? When can I challenge you? When can I remind you to slow down and stay where you are? When can I help you figure out what your end goal is? When can I pull together a bunch of resources so you don't have to do that? To me, it may not on the surface seem like it's streamlined, but it's totally in keeping with the way that I navigate everything. Like, that's part of my education brain. And so the garden coaching part of it is really working with clients like you, maybe, who maybe your story that you carry is like, I'm not a gardener, because in your mind you have this whole idea of what a gardener, what it means. But remember, when I started this, I didn't necessarily start to have all this. I was just responding almost in desperation, and also trying to like pull on nostalgia from my grandmother and my mother. So like helping people really challenge, well, what does it mean to be a gardener? Do you find solace or inspiration in growing things? What does it mean to be a gardener? and what support do you need to get to where you want to go. So unlike maybe a designer who would come in and design a space and then also manage all of the resources to get the design done, I'm much more interested in hearing what people want to do and then helping them do the work that they want to do, right? So in that way, it's really important that, I mean, design is good, it's a starting place, but I want to help them be able to get there, you know, on their own. So that's what I like to do, and I see it as an extension of education, and I also see it as a way to find incredible fulfillment, just the way that people do when they are teachers and they walk into a classroom and they have all these eager faces looking at them.
Right.
Same thing is like that sense of fulfillment of being able to do it on your own.
So Betsy came over to my place, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, maybe. I'm going to give a little bit of background here that we've sort of touched on, but we haven't really delved into. So I grew up with flower gardens and vegetable gardens, and it started with my grandparents. My grandfather had a plot of land like 2 blocks away from where he actually lived.
Oh, wow.
And he could just have this space, and so he grew he grew everything. We got our Halloween pumpkins there.
Wow.
He grew gladiolas, so whenever I see those I think of him. But it was just this massive vegetable flower garden, and when I was very little, I'm gonna say like 2 or 3, my dad ripped up all of the grass on one side of our yard and planted a vegetable garden, and then my mom did all of the flower gardens all around the house, and I helped them with that, and I loved it. I loved it. And so I'm getting teary again. Oh well, welcome to me. Gardening, any kind of gardening feels like home to me. It has amazing memories attached to it, and I love it. But whenever I have even like a succulent, I kill succulents. I don't mean to. I'm a great student. I'm not a great leader when it comes to gardening. And so my mother-in-law brought us heirloom plants, and I was like, and I've killed them all.
I know.
And I feel awful about it. And then when my mom passed 5 years ago, and for some reason I've known in my heart I need to start something. Just like when you were talking about I need to start something. But I was afraid that I would be just sad all of the time. And so I've stayed away from it. And 6 weeks ago, now I'm getting back to the part where Betsy's involved. About 6-8 weeks ago, Bets came over and just like did a lay of the land and said, what do you like about your space? What do you not like about your space? And we have a relatively large backyard that has nothing. It's just grass and then dog. And so Bets came in, and firstly, Betsy's doodles are like so beautiful and pretty. They're artwork. But you could tell them what you did, and then I could share how I...
Well, Nikki was like, I think I might want to do something with my backyard. And I said, yeah, I think you do. It was so exciting because I felt like I didn't get the backstory that you just shared until a little bit later.
Yeah.
But this idea of like holding on to like gardening as legacy.
Yes.
Right? Because I
love how you just said that. Yes.
I think that's a lot of where my desire came from. I didn't have any training except for I had all these memories of really important women in my life gardening. And I knew with my grandma, like she wasn't going to be around forever, but I could keep her flowers going. Like I could keep remembering her with her flowers. So I think that at the back of my mind, that was one of the reasons why I kept asking for flowers, and I killed most of them because I didn't know what I was doing.
Right,
but that doesn't matter, and that speaks a little bit to sort of what gardening can be for you, or maybe gardening isn't about the product, but it's about the legacy or the memories,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Or just getting in and monkeying around. So I came over and I just reminded you that it's not about the individual flowers. It's about the feeling of space and home. And so we talked through ways that you can work with the land and make it so that when you come home and you walk into your space, you feel welcome and peaceful and present. And it's really not about the gardens or anything you grow. It's just really thinking about developing a new relationship with what's outside of your house, and really making it so that you want to come home and you want to be out there early in the morning, late at night, and that it's not just during the growing season, but also in the thinking about during the winter when we think of gardening as being done, but actually it's not.
It's not.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a 12-month experience. So that's what we did, and it was really fun. And I was nervous because I care about you, and I was worried. Well, what if I show up and I don't have any ideas? Yeah, that
Really?
didn't. Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, I didn't tell William that until afterwards. But I said I was really nervous. What if I show up and nothing hits me? And he just sort of shook his head. And I showed up and it was like bam.
It
And
was
then
like boom, 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 boom. You could do this or this or this or this.
and then I came home and I said, William, I think I want to move into their house because I think I want that backyard. Now I can see what can be done. And I guess that's another moment again of me
That's amazing.
being strategic, and I'm really good at planning. I do it in so many other domains of my life. And yet again, it was an opportunity for me to just be present and to listen and to think about what you already have.
Right.
So what do you already have? What is the land already giving you? And then working with it. And then how do you want to best use it? How's it going to make you and Paul feel better and make entertaining better? And just that was important.
What I'm extra loving about this right now is let's just go back for a second. You say, well, here is what we have.
Yeah.
I try to do that all the time just in my life, especially when
Yeah.
thinking about being in the present moment.
Totally.
It's a little windy. But like, instead of wishing that I had something else, whatever it is that we're talking about,
Yeah.
a body, a backyard,
Yep.
whatever,
Yep.
look at what we actually have.
Yep.
And then start the creative process there. Like, I don't have to move in order to
No.
get
Right.
better soil or whatever,
Right,
whatever
totally.
I'm talking about. But like, that just is so. Anytime I'm reminded of that, it's so profound. Like, start with what you have.
Yep. And I would tag on to that because I think this is probably not the segue you wanted, but I would just say, I don't know what this gardening thing is. I just know I have to do it. I just know I have to do it. And for once in my life, I'm just showing up, and I'm not trying to figure out necessarily where it's going to be in 10 years or what I have to let go in order to do this. I'm just practicing showing up. And it's not my line, so whoever put this out in the world, thank you, but it's what you just said, like, what can I do with what I have right now?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is about. What can I do with what I have right now? Instead of, well, I need to have all these things in order to do what I need to do.
Right.
And that's just not served me well here in the garden, and I'm really trying to think about that just generally in my life. Yeah.
I love it. Nuggets. Okay, back to your doodles.
Yeah.
So Betsy comes, and firstly, and I shouldn't be surprised by this because I know you as a friend, but I didn't know what to expect from a garden coach either. I just trust Betsy. It was kind of just that, like, it was a mutual trust. It's like she knew that I was gonna say yes or no, or she trusts me to tell her the truth, and I trust her to tell me the truth. And so that's kind of, I love that. I want to bring that up because here's two people that don't really know what they're doing,
Right.
but they have faith that it's going to work out somehow. And you, notes. I love it. And I love anyone that's organized. So I was like, yes, type A. And then you went and thought about it for a week or so. And then Betsy videotapes herself in front of it, just a sheet of paper, but it's our backyard. And it has all these doodles of what it is eventually going to look like. And it's like 15 minutes long. and it's actually one of the most compelling videos I've ever seen, even though she's just like, and then right here, I mean, but it just made me so happy. And she divided our backyard into like 5 sections, which I loved, because when you're making major changes to your backyard or to any space, it's expensive. And so I would have become very easily overwhelmed. I don't even know that we discussed this, but you just said, pick what you want to do right now and the rest of it will be here later. So we decided to do our patio area, and I have to say, and it was just a couple of upgrades, really. We, like, the bones were there.
Yep.
We planted some hostas around the border of the patio. We did a couple planters with some climbing plants. We added some curtains, which just gave it a little pop of color. The time we spent was maybe 5 or 6 hours total over a week or so. And I have to tell you, we've spent more time outside in that space this summer, and it's only, June 17th right now,
I know.
than we have the past 8 years that we've lived there, because it just needed a little bit of love, but I didn't know how to start.
Right.
I got really
Right.
concerned about it. So, anyway, we'll put a link into how you can contact Betsy for coaching, but as someone who's benefited from that, it couldn't have been a more simple, kind, non-shaming environment. I think that was I carry shame because I've killed all these heirlooms. Like, we can sit and joke about it, but we've also been honest. Like, it's painful, you know? And to now have things growing in the backyard, I feel like I've been forgiven a little bit.
You did it. You did it. Nobody came in. Nobody gave you the final product. You wrestled with you made choices. We kind of bantered back and forth, and you did it. So I wonder, this is just like a wondering, like, how much of this renewed sense of peace comes to you from being in the backyard because you invested a little bit of time and love, but also it reflects what you did.
Yeah.
And that nobody else did it for you. Like, that was a project that you and Paul did. And I think that's really, I mean, that's exciting. I put a post maybe a month ago about the story of ranunculus, and I think it reminds me of this because many years ago, a really dear friend gave me some ranunculus tubers. Ranunculus is a really beautiful flower. It's actually my favorite flower. It's not native to this zone. She gave them to me in a really difficult moment, and I planted them. So I had sort of like a pickup garden at that point. I remember exactly where I put them. I planted them, and because I was going through this really tough time and those bulbs were really metaphorical, I put a lot of weight into what would happen when they grew, and they didn't grow. Like, they didn't grow at all. And so in some ways it was like a second slight. It really hurt that I couldn't grow this ranunculus that had so much symbol to me because they came from a dear friend and they're my favorite and they were going to be a balm for my sadness, and they didn't grow. And do you know what I did is I stopped trying. Like, I just shut that down. I carried this story very well, saying like, I can't grow ranunculus. Isn't that so sad? My very favorite flower I can't grow.
Did you consider yourself like you're failing?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And in fact, if you had asked me even 10 years ago, when we really only had like that bed and that garden bed over here, if I was a gardener, I was like, no, I just don't want the yard to look like a mess. Honestly.
Even though you were gardening.
Even though I was gardening. So I think, I carried that story about the ranunculus for 10 years. I carried it for a long time, partly because those bulbs came at a really sad point in my life, and also it represented failure. And so I let it kind of be this tagline. Well, I can grow hostas, but I can't grow ranunculus. And I don't know what got into me, except for that, now I'm 18 months into really reflecting on gardening. But at whatever, I found some ranunculus online last fall, and I said, I think it's time for me to try again. And there's lots of shame, and there was a lot of fear. I mean, they're just bulbs, I know, but it's symbolic, right? It's so much bigger than that. Well, I ordered them. They take a lot of pampering, I'll just say that. Put them in the ground. I shared some with my mom. we were like comparing notes, and I got them to bloom. But it took me 10 years to like go back to that story that I have been
Wow.
carrying about my ability to grow or to not grow, um, and and so I share that. I actually don't even know how that connects to what you were just saying, but I feel like there was something in there.
Well, that's okay. I don't even know what I was saying.
There was something in there, like, we have to constantly, or not we, but I have to constantly just pause and say, what stories am I continuing to like banter around about
Yeah.
what I can and can't do? Does it make me a gardener because I can finally grow the ranunculus? No, it doesn't. I'm proud of it. I did it, and I can let that go now.
Right.
But I'm still a gardener if I do other things as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
I love that. And then I have a basic question.
Yeah.
You said they're tubers. What does that
Tubers.
mean?
Yeah.
It's like a tube shape.
Actually, the technical gardeners out there would be like, it's actually a corm.
Corm?
A corm. It looks like a dried up octopus. So
Yeah.
it's got a middle,
Uh-huh.
and then it's got all these tentacles, and it's really tiny. And it's not hardy in our really cold winter, so you store it indoors out of light. And then in the spring, you slowly get it acclimated, and then you can plant it in there. But it's basically, a tuber would be like a dahlia tuber. It kind of looks like a sweet potato.
Yep.
But a corm is sort of like this
Corm.
tiny little octopus thing, and you just put it in the ground, and that's
So-
where it comes from.
What do you do in the winter with all of this? You
Sure.
take your. I just figured out the difference between annuals and perennials. That's how those are my basic skills right now, but I do have some skills. So what do you do with your perennials? You leave them in the ground,
I do. I don't do anything with them.
and then they just grow again.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't.
That's amazing to me.
We could do a garden tour of all the plants I've lost.
All the plants I've lost.
Yeah,
before.
exactly. That's
So
kind of where it
then
is.
What do you do with the tubers? Do you have a little place in the garage? Do you?
You know what I do? I dig them up, and I put them in a paper bag that I get from the grocery store after I
Yeah.
go grocery shopping. I maybe put a little soil around it. Some people put sawdust. Maybe someday I'll do that too. Haven't done that yet. I fold up the paper bag and I put it in a dark closet in the basement.
You just store it there till it's
I
time
just
to
leave
plant
it
in the
there.
spring.
So we have a calla lily that's just starting to blossom. In fact, I put it on my feed, I think, today. That was a gift from my husband to our oldest daughter when she turned 1. And calla lilies they can't survive our winters. So every winter I put it inside, and 12 years later, it is
It's
still blooming.
Wow.
I do nothing. I don't water it. I just neglect it of everything. So gladiolas are like that, and so are calla lilies, canna lilies. I have dahlias that I'll dig up. The ranunculus I'll dig up. They're either going to survive or they're not. That's just the way it is.
I mean, that's
it's-
just life. We've got two choices:
Yeah, they're gonna-
live or die.
yeah,
That's it.
That's pretty much so. Either they're going to meet me in the spring or they're not. And if they don't, then I'm like, well, that didn't
Okay,
work
that
out.
didn't happen
Yeah,
when I
that didn't
wanted it
happen.
to.
Yeah, it didn't happen, and that's also realizing that everything has a cycle. There is a cycle to everything, and I got to let that go. The calla lilies, they keep showing up. The gladiolas never blossom, but man, they shoot those green. And I'll just keep trying.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt me to try.
No.
And really, I'll do it late October, early November. I'll just, on a really icky day where I'm like, what am I doing? I'll just get out there, I'll dig it up, I'll shove it in a paper bag, and I throw it downstairs. And then that's the end of it. That's all I do. So it's pretty easy. So the perennials, most of them, depending on the kind of winter that we have, will come back, and some of
Right.
them don't. They just don't, because they just don't. And then the tubers or the corms I store away, and then the annuals, well, you know how that goes. They're not going to come back, except for I do have a patch of snapdragons that came back with vengeance. I've had it happen before, but not this intentionally.
Yeah.
But they are bigger and brighter and more lush, and they just came back, and I didn't do anything.
They just wanted to come back.
They do. I think we had just a mild enough winter, and I planted them sort of near the house, so there's kind of some maybe residual heat. And they just came back, and I'll take them. So those are those lovely surprises that you can't. If I hadn't stopped and thought about it, if I hadn't developed this practice of like every day I'm just going to come out and see what's here and what's present today, then I probably would have passed that by and not remarked on like, wow, that's really amazing. They survived this winter. Like, I've never had that happen before. But now I have this habit, this ritual
Paying attention.
to just like pause and look and wow, that's really interesting. And then I get, because I'm curious, I wonder why that happened. Oh, maybe we had a really mild winter. Will it happen again? I don't know. So, and also I think getting back to your point of just, start with what you have. I could spend a fortune on plants and flowers.
Right.
That's not hard to do, but that's not feasible. And there's this edge to a constraint that I really like and thrive with, which is what can I extend to the most? How can I expand without dumping a ton of money, so that if something dies, it doesn't hurt me that much.
You're not.
I'm not like,
I'm
I
out
wasted
hundreds of dollars,
totally. So last year, actually 2 years ago, I really started learning from the gardener community how to harvest seeds and then grow them and start them on my own. So I have like a gazillion seeds, and I'm still learning how to do it. But I can plant more and more and more snapdragons because I harvest them. I saved the seeds last year, so I don't have to go back to the nursery to get some.
Right.
It just takes time to do it, and then I can have as many as I want, or as many as I can get to cultivate from seed. So, yeah.
And you're budget-minded too.
Yeah, and then I don't have to justify it to myself or to anybody else. And I can also, and I probably should spend some time thinking about why this is, but there's some sense of like, I allow myself more failure if I haven't like invested a lot of money in it. Like I'm much more comfortable like, oh well, that seedling didn't make it. Oh well.
It was $3.
I plucked it last fall, so I don't have to fret over it.
Right.
I'm a little bit more forgiving that way. It's probably worth thinking more about, but yeah.
It's interesting. Okay, before we wrap up.
Yeah.
So you heal and grow and do self-care through gardening and planning.
Yep.
What are your top 2, top 3, top 20 self-care? Like, what do you do for self-care besides what we've been talking about?
It's funny that you asked me that because, I started sort of this gardening presence or whatever practice. Maybe we'll just call it a gardening practice, as a way to slow down and be present. And what I have found is that it has taught me to do that in other parts of my life. Like, oh, I'm feeling really uneasy right now. Maybe I should just pause and think about what is it that's going on right now. If I were in my garden, I know what I would do, but I'm wondering if I can just pause right now and think, what's coming up for me? And certainly we talk about that in the arts, like when you are investigating something, you have to like pause. What's coming up? Why am I feeling that way?
Why do I feel like this?
Right.
Yep.
So I had already cultivated that habit, but I just hadn't necessarily applied it globally to my life.
Sure.
So I think that's one is like just pause and think, well, now I wonder what this is about. I think another thing for me is just like this insatiable curiosity is a really deep form of self-care. I'm just continuously curious about everything. Much to the people who live with me are like, oh my gosh.
Why? Are you always on the computer Googling stuff, or you're always asking questions?
I'm always asking questions, or I'm always like, I wonder what. Or
and they're like, Mom, just.
That's exactly
we don't have
what
to
it is.
wonder about everything.
Right. or I'll get so curious, then I will just jump onto the computer, or I'll try to find a community and just learn more. It's just my nature. But yeah, those that live with me find it frustrating. So I think that's another one. Is like it's really been able to amplify my curiosity in a really great way to make me feel alive. And then I think another thing, probably the last thing, is it's really forcing myself to continuously reflect on what is success. What does that really even mean? Gosh, I've been so good and conditioned in this society that we live in to think of success in a very specific product-driven way, probably very capitalistic. I mean, it isn't probably, it is very capitalistic. And that, I'm lucky.
Yes.
That's really served me well sometimes, and also it's really not served me well. And so to think about, well, what does it mean to be successful? And even though this wasn't part of what you just asked me, I do find myself when things are really hard, work, life, that I do come out here and I tinker, and that sense of success, that's successful to me. And then I can work through whatever it is that I'm working through by just tending and cultivating and being curious.
Here. Yes.
Yeah, just being curious. And sometimes it's metaphorical and sometimes it's just physical. It just physically feels better. What you don't get to see is that when we wrap up this interview, I'm going to lead her over to a couple of plants that I want Nickie to smell and feel, and just to touch, because I think you'll really appreciate it, and it kind of speaks to that, like, why do I come out to the garden?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love you.
Well, I love you too, so it works. And you know what? I just want to say one thing. It's been 28 years.
28 years since we've met? Oh, yeah.
28 years,
I just had
people!
to do that math, the old math. I have not figured out new math yet. We've been friends for 28 years.
Yes. Yep.
But don't we look great?
I mean,
just because I showered for the first time today in about 5 or 6 days. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I will get all of Betsy's information and put it in the comments, but you can find her on Instagram at Roots and Vines. Slip into her DMs, get some coaching going. I can promise you it's worth it. And thanks for watching our very first interview. Yay!
And congratulations to you and all your huge... Look at you blossom. I mean, if we're talking about flowers.
Oh.
Congratulations to you.
Thanks. I'm trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah, that's okay.
So we're doing this now.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.